My husband barely glanced up as I placed my wedding ring on the table beside them, too entranced by the woman in his arms to register the weight of what I was leaving behind. "Keep dancing with her, James. You won't even notice I'm gone." What he didn't know was that I had spent the last 6 months preparing for this exact moment, and by tomorrow morning, I would be completely untraceable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stood at the edge of the crowded ballroom, watching my husband of 11 years spin Victoria Bennett across the dance floor at the Oceanside Resort Charity Gala. James had always been an impressive dancer, one of the many talents that had attracted me to him when we met at law school 15 years ago. Tonight, his custom-tailored tuxedo emphasized his athletic build as he guided Victoria through a complicated tango sequence. Her crimson gown, designed by a former client of my interior design business, complemented his black tie perfectly, as if they had coordinated their outfits. "They make quite the pair, don't they?" Diane Murphy commented, appearing beside me with her signature martini in hand. As the wife of James's law partner and my supposed friend, her tone suggested she was testing my reaction rather than offering support. "They certainly do," I agreed, my voice steadier than I expected. James has always appreciated beautiful dance partners. Diane studied my face, clearly disappointed by my composure. "Victoria's been working closely with the partners on the Westlake development. She's quite dedicated to the project. The Westlake development, a luxury residential complex that had consumed James's time and attention for the past 8 months. The project that required late nights, weekend meetings, and business trips that grew increasingly frequent and poorly documented." "I'm sure she is," I replied, taking a deliberate sip of my champagne. In the relative quiet of the marble-lined restroom, I checked my appearance in the mirror. At 38, I still had the high cheekbones and clear skin that had once landed me occasional modeling jobs to supplement my college tuition. My dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, showcasing the diamond earrings James had given me for our 10th anniversary. Earrings I had discovered were significantly less valuable than the matching necklace Victoria had been wearing at last. Month's firm dinner. As I exited the restroom, I discreetly checked my phone. A single text message confirmed everything was in place. "All set. Car waiting at East Entrance. M. Marcus, my oldest friend from college, and the only person who knew what I was about to do, had been instrumental in preparing my exit. As an IT security specialist who had once been on the receiving end of his own spouse's betrayal, he understood both the emotional and logistical complexities of disappearing from a life that had become unrecognizable. I returned to the ballroom, just as the orchestra transitioned to a slower song. James and Victoria remained on the dance floor, now pressed together in a way that stretched the boundaries of professional courtesy well past their breaking point. His hand rested low on her back, their faces close enough that her auburn hair occasionally brushed his cheek when they turned. Around them, other couples danced with the appropriate distance between them, occasionally glancing toward the too intimate pair with expressions ranging from disapproval to knowing amusement. In that moment, watching my husband hold another woman with such obvious desire, I felt strangely calm, the tranquility of a decision irrevocably made. I navigated through the crowd until I stood at the edge of the dance floor, directly in their line of sight. James saw me first, his expression flickering briefly with something like guilt before settling back into practiced nonchalance. Victoria noticed his momentary tension and turned slightly, offering me a smile that managed to be both apologetic and triumphant. "Catherine," James acknowledged as they danced closer to where I stood. "Victoria and I were just discussing the zoning implications for the Westlake commercial spaces." "With such passion," I observed, my tone neutral. "It must be fascinating." "Subject matter." Victoria had the grace to blush slightly, though her grip on my husband's shoulder didn't loosen. "James has been an incredible mentor," she said, her voice honeyed with false sincerity. "I've learned so much working closely with him." "I'm sure you have," I replied, reaching into my clutch purse. "Don't let me interrupt your mentorship." I placed my platinum wedding band on a nearby cocktail table, the soft clink as it touched, the glass surface somehow audible despite the music and conversation surrounding us. "Keep dancing with her, James," I said quietly. "You won't even notice I'm gone." For a brief moment, confusion crossed his features, a rare occurrence for a man who prided himself on always being the most informed person in any room. Victoria's expression shifted too, the certainty in her eyes faltering as she registered the significance of the ring on the table. "Catherine, don't be dramatic," James said, his voice low but sharp. "We'll discuss this at home." "No," I replied, simply, "we won't." I turned and walked away before he could respond, moving through the crowd with purpose. Behind me, I could sense James making excuses to Victoria, preparing to follow me, to contain what he would perceive as an embarrassing public display. He wouldn't catch me. By the time he extricated himself from Victoria and navigated the crowded ballroom, I would be in Marcus's waiting car, heading toward a future I had carefully constructed without James's knowledge or involvement. What my husband didn't understand, what he had never bothered to discover in our years together, was that beneath my accommodating exterior lay a woman of considerable resources and determination. While he had been building his law career and cultivating his relationship with Victoria, I had been systematically preparing for a life without him, gathering evidence, securing assets, and creating an exit strategy so thorough it would leave even the best legal minds at his firm puzzled for years to come. Tonight wasn't just about a dance, or even an affair. It was about reclaiming my identity from a man who had slowly erased it over the course of our marriage. And as I pushed open the heavy door to the east exit, feeling the cool night air against my skin, I smiled at the thought of what tomorrow would bring, for both of us. Marcus was waiting exactly where he promised, leaning against his sleek black Tesla with the engine running. When he saw me approach in my emerald gown, he straightened immediately, concern evident in his expression. "You actually did it," he said, opening the passenger door. "Are you okay?" I slid into the seat, the silk of my dress rustling against the leather interior. "I'm better than I've been in years." As Marcus pulled away from the Oceanside Resort, I resisted the urge to look back. 11 years of marriage didn't deserve a backward glance, not when I'd spent the last 6 months looking forward. Through the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of James bursting through the east entrance doors, scanning the circular driveway with increasing agitation. His hand was clutching something small and metallic, my wedding ring. "He's going to call," Marcus warned as we merged onto the coastal highway, the resort's lights diminishing behind us. "Probably already blowing up your phone." I reached into my clutch and removed my personal cell phone, the one James knew about, and powered it off. "Let him call. By morning, this number won't exist anymore." Marcus nodded, his eyes on the road as we headed north along the coast. At 42, Marcus Chen had the calm demeanor of someone who had weathered his own storms. We'd been friends since our undergraduate days at Berkeley, before law school had introduced me to James, before Marcus had fallen for and subsequently been betrayed by his ex-husband. We had supported each other through our respective heartbreaks, his sudden and explosive, mine gradual and insidious. "Your go bag is in the trunk," he said, referring to the suitcase I had packed with essentials and stored at his apartment 2 months ago. "New ID package is in the glove compartment. The offshore account is active, and the private banking app is installed on your new phone." He tapped the console between us, where a smartphone I'd never seen before waited in a charging cradle. "Thank you," I said, the words inadequate for the scope of his help. "I couldn't have done this without you." Marcus glanced over briefly. "After what Ryan did to me, and everything you did to help me rebuild, consider us even." I watched the familiar coastline speed by, The beaches where James and I had once walked during our early courtship, the oceanfront restaurants where we'd celebrated anniversaries, the scenic lookouts where we'd sometimes parked just to watch the sunset in companionable silence, memories from a marriage that had once felt solid, before ambition and success had transformed my husband into someone I barely recognized. "You're thinking about the early days," Marcus observed, reading my expression with the accuracy of long friendship. "Wondering where it all went wrong," I admitted. "When exactly James decided I was an accessory rather than a partner." "From what you've told me, it was a gradual shift. The classic frog in slowly heating water scenario. He wasn't wrong. When James and I had met at Stanford Law, we'd been equals, both ambitious, both brilliant, both from middle-class backgrounds determined to build something significant. Our wedding, modest by San Diego standards, had been filled with promises of partnership, of building a life together where both our careers would flourish. The first compromise had seemed reasonable, putting my career on hold temporarily while James established himself at Murphy, Keller & Associates. I'd taken a position at a small design firm, using my aesthetic sensibilities and organizational skills while waiting for the right time to return to legal practice. That right time never came. Each year brought new reasons to delay my legal career: James's first major case, his promotion to junior partner, the firm's expansion, the economic downturn that made new attorney positions scarce. Meanwhile, my interior design work had developed from a temporary diversion into a modestly successful business, though James consistently referred to it as my little hobby when introducing me at firm functions. "Remember our second anniversary? Dinner?" I asked Marcus, the memory surfacing unexpectedly. "When James announced he'd been assigned to the Riverside development?" Marcus nodded. "You were so proud of him." "I spent that entire night asking questions about his new project, celebrating his success. He answered every question about his work, accepted every compliment." I stared out at the darkened coastline. Later that week, I told him about landing. The Henderson estate renovation, my biggest design contract at that point. He changed the subject within 2 minutes to talk about a new suit he wanted to buy. That pattern had repeated countless times over our marriage. My achievements minimized or ignored, his celebrated and centered. The disparity had been so gradual that I'd convinced myself it was normal, that supporting his career was my role in our partnership. By the time I recognized the imbalance for what it was, I had already surrendered so much of my identity that reclaiming it seemed impossible. "The last straw wasn't even the affair," I said quietly. "It was finding out he'd mortgaged our house, without telling me." Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Still can't believe he managed that." Forged signatures are remarkably effective when you have a cooperative notary at your law firm. The discovery 3 months ago had been the catalyst for my exit plan, finding mortgage paperwork hidden in James's home office drawer, documentation for a $750,000 loan against our fully paid home, money that had vanished into accounts I couldn't access. When confronted, James had dismissed my concerns with practiced ease. "It's a temporary liquidity solution, Catherine. The Westlake development requires some personal investment from the partners. The returns will be spectacular. Trust me. Trust me." The phrase he'd used countless times throughout our marriage, usually preceding decisions that benefited his career, his comfort, his image, while costing me pieces of my independence. "Trust me when we sell your grandmother's lake house to invest in the firm. Trust me when we use your inheritance for the down payment on the Rancho Santa Fe property. Trust me when I say there's nothing between Victoria and me." "Did you ever confront him about Victoria directly?" Marcus asked, as if reading my thoughts. "What would be the point? He'd deny it, make me feel paranoid and insecure." Classic James. I shook my head. Besides, Victoria wasn't the problem. She was just a symptom. The affair, which I'd known about for at least 4 months, thanks to bank statements showing jewelry purchases and hotel charges in Las Vegas when James was supposedly at a partner's, retreat in Phoenix was merely the final confirmation that our marriage existed now only as a convenient arrangement for James. He wanted the respectable wife at home while pursuing his real passions elsewhere. "You know he's going to portray you as unstable," Marcus warned as we turned off the coastal highway onto a less traveled road heading inland. "When he realizes what you've done, he'll create a narrative that makes him the victim." Let him. I felt a surprising lightness at the thought of James spinning his stories, trying to control a situation that had already escaped his grasp. By the time he figures out the extent of what I've done, I'll be established somewhere he can't reach. Me? Marcus glanced at me with respect and perhaps a touch of concern. "You've always been 10 steps ahead of everyone, Catherine. It's why you would have made a formidable attorney." "I still might," I replied, allowing myself to consider possibilities that had seemed closed to me for years. As we drove further from the coast, away from the life I had shared with James, I thought about the documentation carefully hidden in a secure cloud account, copies of the forged mortgage papers, bank statements showing James's systematic draining of our joint assets, records of his investments that never generated returns for our household. Evidence I had gathered methodically over months, not out of vindictiveness, but self-preservation. "We're almost there," Marcus said as we approached a secluded cabin nestled among towering pines. The property, officially owned by a corporate entity Marcus had created years ago, was our agreed-upon temporary safe house, the place where Catherine Elliott would disappear and someone new would emerge. "Have you decided on a name?" Marcus asked as he parked beside the cabin, the headlights illuminating a small covered porch. I smiled, feeling the first genuine excitement I'd experienced in months. Elena Taylor. The first name borrowed from my beloved grandmother. The surname simple and forgettable, an identity I had been constructing piece by piece while James was occupied with Victoria and the Westlake development. "Elena Taylor," Marcus repeated. "It suits you somehow." Inside the cabin, warm and rustic with its stone fireplace and wooden beams, I finally kicked off the uncomfortable heels I'd worn to the gala. The physical relief paralleled the emotional unburdening of stepping away from a marriage that had slowly suffocated me. I unclasped the diamond earrings, James's calculated gift that had appreciated in value, an investment disguised as affection, and placed them on the coffee table. "You can sell these too," I told Marcus, who would handle liquidating what assets I could legally claim while establishing my new life. "Add it to the exit fund." Marcus nodded, placing a glass of red wine in my hand, a Cabernet from the vineyard. We'd visited on a college road trip long before James, before complications, when possibilities had seemed limitless. "To Elena Taylor," he toasted, raising his own glass. "May she live the life Catherine Elliott deserved." I clinked my glass against his, the simple ceremony marking the transition I had planned so carefully. "To second chances," I added, as we sat before the fireplace, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows across the rustic walls. I felt a surprising absence of grief for my marriage. Perhaps I had already mourned it during the months of discovery and planning, or perhaps there was nothing left to mourn after years of slow erosion. "He'll be home by now," I said, picturing James entering our immaculate house in Rancho Santa Fe, expecting to find me waiting to be scolded for my dramatic gesture at the gala. Checking the bedroom, the guest room, calling my cell repeatedly. By morning, he'll be calling friends, family, maybe even hospitals, Marcus added, his tone neutral rather than concerned. "By noon tomorrow, he'll contact the police," I continued, walking through the scenario we had rehearsed. "They'll take a report but explain that adults are allowed to leave their marriages. They'll see no evidence of foul play, no reason to devote resources to finding a woman who simply walked away from her husband, and by the time he thinks to check your personal accounts, he'll find them emptied," I finished. "Legally justifiably emptied of exactly half of our legitimate joint assets. No more, no less. What James wouldn't discover until much later, perhaps, Not until the mortgage company began demanding missed payments was the evidence I had secured of his financial indiscretions, his unauthorized use of our home as collateral, his systematic draining of our investment accounts. By then, Catherine Elliott would be a ghost, and Elena Taylor would be building a new life far from San Diego's coastal mansions and charity galas. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked, his question piercing the comfortable silence that had settled between us. I considered the question seriously, swirling the wine in my glass. Not of leaving, not of starting over. I paused, recognizing a flutter of anxiety beneath my determination. Maybe a little scared of who I'll be without him. It's been 11 years of shaping myself to fit his expectations. You were Catherine. Long before you were Mrs. Elliott, Marcus reminded me gently. And you'll be even more as Elena. Outside, an owl hooted softly in the darkness, the sound carrying through the cabin's slightly open window. A night creature comfortable in the shadows, certain of its path even without full light. I found myself smiling at the parallel. "Tomorrow we dye this," I said, touching my dark hair that James had always insisted I keep long. "And I start becoming someone he won't recognize if he passed me on the street." The thought should have been terrifying, erasing the external markers of an identity I'd held for nearly 4 decades. Instead, it felt like freedom, like stepping out of a costume I'd worn for an exhausting performance that had never earned genuine applause. "The good news," Marcus said with a small smile, "is that James has been so self-absorbed for so long, he probably couldn't describe you accurately to investigators anyway." The observation startled a laugh from me, perhaps the first authentic one in months. "You're right. He'd remember the designer labels, the appropriate hairstyle, the acceptable jewelry. Not me. Never really me." As the night deepened around the cabin, I felt the first tentative flutters of something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Somewhere beyond this night, beyond the disappearance I had orchestrated so carefully, Elena Taylor waited to emerge. A woman undefined by her relationship to a man who had never truly seen her. A woman with plans, resources, and the hard-won wisdom of someone who had learned that vanishing could sometimes be the most powerful form of becoming visible to oneself. "Get some sleep," Marcus advised, gathering our empty wine glasses. "Tomorrow's transformation starts early." I nodded, suddenly aware of the bone-deep exhaustion that accompanied the adrenaline of my escape. As I prepared for bed in the cabin's small but comfortable guest room, I realized I had left my wedding ring behind, not as a dramatic gesture for James to find, but as a deliberate unburdening, leaving behind the weight of promises that had proven hollow, expectations that had proven constraining, and a life that had proven to be built on shifting sand rather than solid foundation. What James would never understand, even as he searched for me in the coming days, was that I hadn't simply left him. I had chosen myself, perhaps for the first time since we'd met. And in that choice lay a power he had never recognized I possessed. I awoke to the sound of my new phone buzzing with an incoming call. The digital clock beside the bed read 8:17 a.m., later than I'd intended to sleep, but understandable given the emotional toll of the previous night. Marcus's name illuminated the screen. "James has called the police," he said without preamble. When I answered, "He's playing the concerned husband card. Hard." I sat up, immediately alert. "Already? That's faster than we anticipated." "He's got connections in the department. Remember that fundraiser he hosted for the police chief's re-election campaign? They've agreed to treat this as a priority missing persons case, instead of waiting the customary 24 hours. This was the first real complication in my carefully constructed exit plan. James moving faster, leveraging his influence more effectively than I had calculated. A chill ran through me despite the cabin's warmth. "How do you know this?" I asked, already moving to gather the clothes Marcus had purchased for Elena Taylor. Simple, practical items, nothing like Catherine Elliott's designer wardrobe. "I have a friend at the station. She called to warn me that they're checking known associates, including me. Expect a visit to my apartment within hours. My heart rate accelerated. You need to leave. Already on my way to the secondary location, grabbed the essentials and wiped down surfaces. Marcus had planned for contingencies like this, his experience with high-level cybersecurity making him naturally paranoid. But this accelerates our timeline. You need to be completely transformed and on the road by noon. I glanced at the array of supplies waiting on the bathroom counter. Hair dye, colored contacts, makeup techniques researched specifically to alter the appearance of my facial structure. The physical transformation from Catherine to Elena would normally take careful time and practice. Now I'd have to rush. What about the financial transfers? I asked, mentally recalculating each step of my plan. Completed at 6 a.m. as scheduled. Half of all legitimate joint assets moved to the untraceable accounts. The documentation of his financial misconduct is secure in the cloud. Dead man switch is active. The dead man switch had been Marcus's idea. If I didn't input a specific code every 72 hours, evidence of James's financial improprieties would automatically be sent to his law firm partners, the mortgage company, and the California Bar Association. Insurance against James potentially using his resources to pursue me beyond reasonable limits. He's giving interviews to local news, Marcus continued. KZTV is already running a segment on the missing wife of prominent attorney. He's got a photo of you from the firm's Christmas party circulating. I pulled up the local news website on my new phone and found myself staring at an image of Catherine Elliott in a burgundy cocktail dress, smiling beside James at the firm's holiday celebration 4 months earlier. The headline read, "Prominent. Attorney's wife vanishes after charity gala." James's statement to the press was a masterpiece of concerned husband rhetoric. I'm desperate to find my wife and make sure she's safe. Catherine has been under significant stress recently, and I fear she may be disoriented or confused. If anyone has seen her, please contact authorities immediately. Stress, disoriented, confused. I read the words aloud, a bitter laugh escaping me. Setting up the mental health defense already. Standard playbook, Marcus confirmed. If she's not the victim of foul play, she must be unstable. It was exactly as we had predicted. James would never accept that I had chosen to leave him, that I had orchestrated my own disappearance. His ego required that I be either taken against my will or mentally incompetent. The alternative, that I had outmaneuvered him, was inconceivable to a man who had built his identity on being the smartest person in every room. There's more, Marcus said, his voice taking on a grimness that sent another chill through me. He's offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to your safe return. This was unexpected, not the reward itself, which was a predictable tactic, but the amount. $50,000 was substantial enough to motivate serious efforts from amateur sleuths, desperate individuals, and even professional investigators outside law enforcement. That complicates things, I acknowledged, moving to the window to check the cabin's perimeter. The property was isolated, surrounded by dense pine trees, but no longer felt as secure as it had the night before. We need to move up the timeline for getting me out of the state. Already working on it. The bus ticket to Phoenix is useless now, too many potential witnesses, too easily traced. I'm arranging an alternative. The sound of highway traffic came through the phone. Marcus was clearly driving while we spoke. Check the second compartment of your go bag. There's an envelope with $10,000 cash and a backup ID for emergencies. I unzipped the hidden compartment of the suitcase and found the sealed manila envelope exactly as described. Inside was a driver's license for Sarah Williams with my photo, along with the cash in mixed denominations. We had prepared this secondary, identity as insurance, though I had hoped not to need it. I'll be Elena until I cross the state line, I decided, then switch to Sarah for the next leg. Good thinking. Less chance of establishing a pattern. Marcus paused, and I could hear him changing lanes. there's something else you should know. Victoria Bennett isn't just James's colleague anymore. According to my source at the department, she's at your house right now, supporting James during this difficult time. The revelation shouldn't have stung. I had known about their affair for months, had used it strategically as cover for my own preparations. Yet something about the swiftness with which Victoria had moved into the supportive partner role, likely sleeping in my bed less than 24 hours after I disappeared, felt like a final confirmation of how little my marriage had meant. Of course, she is, I said, keeping my voice steady. That's actually helpful. The more distracted James is with Victoria, the less effectively he'll search. Don't underestimate him, Catherine, Marcus warned. Regardless of his personal failings, he's built his career on finding weaknesses in opposing positions, and right now, you're the opposition. He was right. For all his self-absorption and betrayal, James Elliott was a formidable legal mind with connections throughout Southern California and resources I couldn't match. If he dedicated himself to finding me with the same intensity he applied to winning cases, my carefully constructed escape could unravel. There's another development, Marcus continued after a moment of silence. They've accessed your personal cell phone location data. The police have triangulated it to the Oceanside Resort area, obviously, since that's where you left it. But they're expanding the search radius and checking all surveillance cameras within a 5-mile perimeter. This was expected, elementary, investigative procedure, but hearing it confirmed made the threat more immediate. If they identified Marcus's Tesla on security footage, the connection would be established, and he would face serious questioning. You need to ditch your car, I said, the realization hitting me suddenly. They'll be looking for it now. Already arranged. I'm meeting a contact in Riverside who specializes in providing untraceable transportation. By tonight, the Tesla will be in a shipping container headed for the Port of Long Beach, and I'll be driving something thoroughly unmemorable, Marcus. Had resources and connections I hadn't known about until I'd approached him for help 6 months ago. His own experience escaping an abusive relationship had led him to develop a network of people who operated in the shadows of legality. Not criminals exactly, but specialists in helping people disappear legitimately from dangerous situations. Moved to the bathroom and began the process of transformation, applying the dark honey blonde hair dye that would replace my natural near-black color. As the chemical smell filled the small space, I studied my reflection. The face that had smiled obligingly in countless firm photos, had maintained composure through years of subtle diminishment, had become a mask I wore so convincingly I sometimes forgot what lay beneath. Do you think he loved me? I asked suddenly, the question emerging from some vulnerable place I'd thought sealed off. Ever? Marcus was silent for a long moment. I think he loved having you, he finally replied. The perfect attorney's wife, beautiful and accomplished enough to reflect well on him, accommodating enough not to challenge his sense of superiority. Whether that's love? It's not, I finished, applying the dye with methodical strokes. It never was. As I waited for the color to set, I powered up the laptop Marcus had provided, a clean device with security measures that would make tracking nearly impossible. I needed to check my new financial accounts, confirm that the transfers had cleared successfully, and review the transportation options for leaving California. The offshore account showed the expected balance, exactly half of what James and I had legitimately accumulated together over 11 years of marriage. I had been meticulous about this point, working with a forensic accountant to identify and document what assets were genuinely joint and what James had diverted to his private accounts or invested without my knowledge or consent. I had taken precisely what was legally mine, not a penny more. What James would discover, gradually and painfully over the coming weeks, was how much he had squandered or hidden that I had chosen not to pursue. The mortgaged house, the diverted retirement funds, the investments that had somehow never generated returns for our household. I had documented it all but left it behind. Evidence that would emerge only if he pushed too hard to find me. My laptop screen suddenly flickered, then displayed an incoming video call request from Marcus. I accepted, and his face appeared, tense but focused as he drove. "Change of plans," he said without greeting. "They found your cell phone at the resort, which means they know you left it deliberately. James is now suggesting to investigators that you might have been planning this disappearance for some time. They're pulling your internet search history, bank records, phone logs, everything." The acceleration of the investigation sent a spike of adrenaline through me. James was thinking more clearly, more strategically than I had given him credit for. Perhaps the public loss of face, the prominent attorney whose wife walked out during a charity gala, had sharpened his usually self-centered focus. "What does this mean for our timeline?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. "It means they'll connect you to me within hours, not days. Every minute you stay at the cabin increases the risk." Marcus checked his rearview mirror, a habit born of justified paranoia. "I've arranged an extraction. There's a woman arriving in approximately 45 minutes, early 60s, drives a brown Subaru Outback. She'll identify herself as Teresa from book club. Go with her, no questions asked." Marcus: "I need to go dark for a while, Catherine," he interrupted. "Once they identify me as helping you, they'll monitor everything. My movements, communications, financial transactions. I've prepared for this, but it means I won't be able to contact you directly for some time." The realization that I was about to lose my only ally, my lifeline in this precarious transition, hit me with unexpected force. "How will I know you're okay? Watch for donation confirmations to the Pacific Wildlife Fund. 1 donation each week, I'm safe. If they stop—" He didn't need to finish the thought. "Is this worth it?" I asked suddenly. "The risk to you? To your career? Maybe I should just—" "Don't," he cut me off firmly. "Don't even think about going back. You had valid, serious reasons for leaving. James's financial deceptions alone justified everything you're doing." His expression softened slightly. "Besides, this isn't my first rodeo with disappearing acts. I know how to become invisible when necessary." I nodded, forcing down the doubt that had momentarily surfaced. "Thank you for everything." "Finish becoming Elena," he instructed, his eyes returning to the road ahead. "I'll see you on the other side of this." The video call ended, leaving me staring at my reflection in the darkened screen. Catherine Elliott in transition, hair covered in dye, features still recognizable but soon to be altered through careful application of techniques researched over months of preparation. I returned to the bathroom to rinse the dye from my hair, watching as the water ran golden brown, carrying away the darkness that had been part of my identity for decades. As I dried and styled the new honey blonde locks, I barely recognized the woman in the mirror, which was precisely the point. The colored contacts came next, transforming my dark brown eyes to a light hazel that completely changed the impact of my face. Then the makeup, applied to subtly alter the apparent structure of my cheekbones, the fullness of my lips, the arch of my eyebrows. Small changes individually, but cumulatively creating a woman James would walk past without a second glance. 40 minutes after Marcus's call, I stood fully dressed as Elena Taylor. Honey blonde hair, hazel eyes, wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of Catherine's tailored dresses, practical ankle boots instead of designer heels, a single silver chain instead of statement jewelry. I packed the few remaining items into my go bag, making sure to leave no trace of my presence in the cabin. From the window, I spotted a brown Subaru turning onto the dirt driveway, right on schedule. A woman with silver hair and a practical denim jacket emerged, scanning the property with the alert awareness of someone accustomed to clandestine operations. As I prepared to meet her, to take the next step in my carefully planned vanishing act, I thought of James, likely standing in our living room at this very moment, surrounded by police officers and investigators, Victoria hovering supportively nearby, his controlled fury building as he realized that his wife had not only left him, but had done so in a way that publicly undermined his carefully constructed image. The woman who had been Catherine Elliott smiled at that image, a smile that belonged entirely to Elena Taylor now, and picked up her bag. It was time to disappear completely. Teresa from book club turned out to be Marlene Vasquez, a retired social worker who now dedicated her life to helping women escape dangerous situations. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and laugh lines framed eyes that missed nothing as she drove us away from the cabin. "You're better prepared than most," she commented after we'd been driving for nearly an hour in comfortable silence. "Most women arrive with nothing but the clothes on their back and terror in their eyes." "I had time to plan," I replied, watching the landscape change from dense forest to open desert as we headed east. "And resources." Marlene nodded, her eyes never leaving the road. "Resources help, but the planning, that's what makes the difference between those who stay gone and those who get pulled back in." For the next several hours, we traveled along secondary highways, avoiding major interstates and their surveillance cameras. Marlene was meticulous about varying our speed, taking unexpected turns and switching license plates at a remote gas station where the attendant greeted her with familiar recognition but asked no questions. By late afternoon, we reached what appeared to be an abandoned motel on the outskirts of a small desert town. The faded sign read, "Sundown Motor Lodge," but the parking lot was empty except for 3 well-maintained vehicles that contradicted the property's dilapidated exterior. "Home base," Marlene explained, pulling around to the back of the building. "Looks like nothing from the outside, which is exactly the point." Inside, the motel revealed itself to be a clean, functional safe house. The lobby had been converted into a communal living space with comfortable furniture, a well-stocked kitchen, and multiple computer workstations. 2 women looked up as we entered, one approximately my age, another barely out of her 20s, both with the watchful eyes of people accustomed to looking over their shoulders. "This is Elena," Marlene introduced me, using my new name naturally. "She'll be with us briefly before continuing her journey." The women nodded but didn't offer their names, another safety protocol in a place where identities were precious and fragile things. I recognized the older woman's careful positioning, seated with her back to the wall, clear sightlines to all entrances, as the habit of someone who had learned vigilance the hard way. "You can use room 12, Marlene told me, handing over a key attached to a plain wooden fob. "There's secure internet access if you need it, but I'd advise minimal digital footprint for at least the first 72 hours after disappearing." I thanked her and made my way to the room, small but immaculately clean, with blackout curtains and a white noise machine beside the bed. After setting down my bag, I allowed myself a moment to acknowledge the surreality of my situation. 2 days ago, I had been Catherine Elliott, respected interior designer and wife of prominent attorney James Elliott, preparing for a charity gala in our coastal community. Now I was Elena Taylor, a woman with blonde hair and hazel eyes, hiding in a secret safe house in the desert. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Marlene stood there holding a tablet computer. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "Your disappearance has made national news." She handed me the tablet displaying a CNN article. "Search intensifies for missing wife of California attorney." The story included a formal portrait of James looking appropriately concerned, alongside a recent photo of me from a charity event. The article quoted James extensively about my increasingly erratic behavior in recent months and his fears for my safety. "He's certainly committed to the narrative," I observed, scanning the article with professional detachment. Suggesting I might have been displaying symptoms of early-onset dementia? That's creative. Marlene studied me with newfound respect. Most women would be upset seeing their husband publicly questioning their mental health. I'm sure he'd prefer that too. The alternative, admitting his wife left him because she discovered his financial fraud and infidelity. I handed the tablet back to her. Besides, it's what I expected. James will protect his reputation at all costs. There's something else, Marlene said, her tone shifting slightly. Something that wasn't in our initial briefing from Marcus. She pulled up another news article from a local San Diego business journal. This ran 3 days ago, before your disappearance. The headline read, "Elliott and Associates to open New York office amidst expansion." The article detailed how James Elliott, formerly of Murphy, Keller and Associates, was launching his own firm with backing from major investors, including the Bennett Financial Group. Bennett, I repeated, the name registering immediately. As in Victoria Bennett? Marlene nodded. According to this, her father, Robert Bennett, is the primary investor in James's new venture. The New York office is scheduled to open next month, with James relocating to oversee operations. I took the tablet back, scanning the article more carefully. There it was in black and white, proof of plans James had never mentioned, a major career move and relocation he had kept completely hidden from his wife. He was planning to leave anyway, I said softly, the realization crystallizing with perfect clarity. All those mysterious investments, the mortgage on our house, he was funding his own exit strategy. There's more, Marlene swiped to another article, this one from a real estate publication dated just 1 week earlier. James Elliott and Victoria Bennett purchased Manhattan penthouse for $4.2 million. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet as I stared at the photo of my husband and his mistress, standing proudly in an elegant Manhattan apartment with panoramic views of Central Park. The article mentioned they were preparing for a bi-coastal lifestyle with the launch of Elliott and Associates East Coast headquarters. $4.2 million, I repeated numbly. That's almost exactly the amount he's drained from our accounts over the past year. Marlene's expression was compassionate, but unsurprised. Men like your husband often follow predictable patterns. They don't leave until everything is arranged to their advantage. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the tablet still clutched in my hands. All those months I'd spent planning my escape, gathering evidence of James's financial deceptions, documenting his affair with Victoria. And all along, he had been preparing to discard me anyway. The home equity he had stolen, the investment accounts he had drained, the retirement funds he had borrowed, all of it funneled into his new life with Victoria, a life that had been taking shape in parallel to my own escape plans. When was he going to tell me? I wondered aloud, though the answer was obvious. James would have blindsided me at the moment most advantageous to him, leaving me with as little time and as few resources as possible to contest his actions. Does this change anything for you? Marlene asked quietly. Knowing he was planning to leave? I considered the question carefully, examining my emotional response to this revelation. There was shock, certainly, and a strange sense of vindication. My suspicions had been not only correct, but perhaps even understated. But beneath those, immediate reactions was something unexpected. Relief. It changes everything, I said finally, looking up at Marlene with newfound clarity. And nothing at all. She raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to elaborate. I've spent months questioning whether I was overreacting, whether I should have tried harder to save my marriage, I explained. Part of me still wondered if I was making a catastrophic mistake by disappearing, if there might have been a path to reconciliation if I'd confronted James directly. I gestured to the tablet with its damning evidence. Now I know there wasn't. While I was planning my escape, he was arranging my abandonment. The only difference is that my way preserves my dignity and financial security. His would have left me shell-shocked and destitute. Marlene nodded, understanding lighting her eyes. This is why we document everything. Why we gather evidence even when we're not sure we'll need it. Because men like your husband rewrite history to suit their narratives. I thought about the cloud. Storage filled with meticulous records of James's financial manipulations. The evidence I had compiled not out of vindictiveness, but self-preservation. Evidence that now served a dual purpose, protecting me from his pursuit and providing incontrovertible proof that my departure had been not only justified but necessary. "I need to contact Marcus," I said, standing up with renewed determination. "This changes our leverage position significantly." "Marcus has gone dark," Marlene reminded me. "But I have a secure communication channel I can use in emergencies. This qualifies." She took the tablet back. "What do you want me to tell him?" I thought carefully, considering the strategic implications of this new information. "Tell him to accelerate the documentation release to James's former partners at Murphy, Keller and Associates. They deserve to know he's been poaching their clients for his new venture. And tell him to anonymously tip the California Bar Association about the Manhattan penthouse purchase. They'll be very interested in how a lawyer allegedly concerned about his missing wife managed to close on luxury real estate days before she disappeared." Marlene's smile was approving. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said, a plan forming rapidly in my mind. "I want to modify my exit route. Instead of heading west as we originally planned, I'm going east, to New York." Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "That seems risky. Won't New York be the first place they look once the connection to James's new office becomes public?" "Exactly," I confirmed. "They'll look for Catherine Elliott in New York, a desperate woman trying to confront her husband and his mistress. No one will be looking for Elena Taylor, the independent business consultant who arrived in the city months before James and Victoria's planned relocation." Understanding dawned in Marlene's eyes. "You're going to establish yourself in their territory before they even arrive." "I'm going to be there waiting when their carefully constructed new life implodes," I corrected. "Not to confront them or expose them personally. That would put me at risk. But to ensure I have front-row seats to the consequences of their actions." For the first time since I'd placed my wedding ring on that cocktail table at the Oceanside Resort, I felt something beyond determination and relief. I felt a spark of genuine excitement for the future. Not a future defined by reaction to James's betrayal, but one constructed entirely on my own terms. "I'll need a new identity package," I told Marlene. "Elena Taylor needs a professional background that would make her valuable in Manhattan's competitive business environment." Marlene nodded. "I know someone who specializes in creating verifiable employment histories, professional references, even digital footprints that can withstand moderate scrutiny. It won't be cheap." "Money isn't an issue," I assured her. "I have access to exactly half of what James and I legitimately earned together, which is more than enough to fund this next chapter." As Marlene left to make the necessary arrangements, I opened my go bag and removed the secure laptop Marcus had provided. It was time to adapt my carefully constructed exit plan to incorporate this new information. Not in panic or reaction, but with the same methodical attention to detail that had characterized my preparations from the beginning. I opened a new document and began typing, outlining Elena Taylor's background, credentials, and professional specialties. After 11 years of suppressing my legal education to accommodate James's ego, I would now put it to use constructing an identity that could navigate the sophisticated business environment of Manhattan, an identity that would allow me not just to escape James Elliott, but to thrive in the very world he was planning to conquer. On the bed beside me, the tablet continuously updated with news of the search for Catherine Elliott. Police had officially classified me as a missing person. James had increased the reward to $100,000. Victoria Bennett was now openly acting as family spokesperson, her concerned expression perfectly calibrated for the cameras as she pleaded for information about her. "Dear friend Catherine." The performance was flawless, except for the 4-carat diamond on Victoria's left hand, visible in several of the news photos, matching the description of a ring James had purchased 2 months earlier from a jeweler in La Jolla. A purchase I had discovered while meticulously tracking his financial deceptions. They had been planning this for months. James's new firm, their Manhattan penthouse, their engagement, all while systematically draining the financial resources I had helped build over 11 years of marriage. Had I not discovered their deception and planned my own exit, I would have been left with nothing but a hollow apology, and perhaps a token settlement negotiated by whichever attorney from James's firm he assigned to manage his divorce. Instead, I had secured my fair share of our assets, preserved evidence of his financial misconduct, and created an escape route that would allow me to rebuild my life on my own terms. And now, with this new information, I could position myself to witness the inevitable unraveling of their carefully constructed plans. As the desert sunset painted the motel room in shades of gold and amber, I felt a peculiar sense of gratitude toward James and Victoria. Their betrayal had forced me to reclaim parts of myself I had gradually surrendered: my ambition, my independence, my clear-eyed assessment of reality without the distortion of wishful thinking. In plotting to discard me, they had inadvertently set me free. I closed the laptop and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to glimpse the vast desert landscape stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere in San Diego, James was orchestrating a frantic search for a woman who no longer existed, and here I stood, Elena Taylor emerging from Catherine Elliott's ashes, ready to rise toward a future entirely of my own making. 3 days after, arriving at the Sundown Motor Lodge, I barely recognized myself, not just physically, but fundamentally. Elena Taylor was taking shape as more than just an alias. She was becoming a fully realized identity, with a past, present, and carefully crafted future. "Your documentation is ready," Marlene announced, entering my room after a brief knock. She carried a slim leather portfolio embossed with subtle geometric patterns. Dimitri outdid himself this time. Dimitri, I had learned, was Marlene's enigmatic contact who specialized in creating legitimate-appearing identities. Not false identities, an important distinction in Marlene's network. Elena Taylor was technically me, just with a different name, and carefully constructed background that would withstand scrutiny without triggering identity theft concerns or fraud charges. "Everything in here has proper foundation," Marlene explained as she opened the portfolio. "Elena Taylor has a social security number tied to a real person born in 1985 who died in infancy. The degree certificates are from institutions that have suffered unfortunate database corruption in specific year ranges. Your employment history includes companies that have closed or been acquired, making verification challenging but not impossible." I examined the documents with growing appreciation for their sophistication. A bachelor's degree in business administration from a respectable state university. A master's in organizational development from a private college that had merged with a larger institution 5 years ago. Employment history showing progressive experience in corporate consulting with firms that had indeed existed but were now defunct or absorbed into conglomerates. "It's brilliant," I said, running my fingers over the embossed diploma. "These look completely authentic." "They are authentic," Marlene corrected, "just not for the reasons most people would assume. Dimitri doesn't create forgeries. He creates plausible alternatives using legitimate processes and systemic vulnerabilities." The portfolio also contained bank statements showing a modest but respectable financial history for Elena Taylor, credit reports reflecting careful management of limited resources, even medical records documenting routine care at clinics in various cities, creating the picture of someone who relocated frequently for work. "Your new digital footprint is being established as we speak," Marlene continued. "LinkedIn profile, professional email history, even carefully backdated social media with appropriate privacy settings. Minimal content, but enough to seem like a real person who's simply selective about online presence." I nodded, understanding the delicate balance. Too little online presence would seem suspicious in today's world. Too much would create unnecessary exposure and opportunities for inconsistencies. "What about references?" I asked, thinking of the inevitable verification calls that would come if I secured consulting work in New York. Marlene smiled. You have 3 former supervisors and 2 colleagues ready to provide glowing recommendations. They're real people who work with our network, professionals who understand the need for new beginnings and have agreed to serve as references for identities like yours. The thoroughness of these preparations was astounding. While I had spent months gathering evidence of James's betrayal and securing my financial assets, Marlene's network had clearly spent years developing systems to help people safely disappear and rebuild. "There's something else," Marlene said, pulling a final document from the portfolio. "Your consulting specialty." I took the paper, which outlined Elena Taylor's particular expertise: corporate reorganization following leadership transitions, with emphasis on preserving institutional knowledge while facilitating cultural renewal. "It's perfect," I said, immediately seeing the strategic value. "This positions me as someone companies would want involved during exactly the kind of transition James is planning with his new firm." Marlene nodded. Dimitri researched Elliott and Associates' public announcements. They're planning to absorb several smaller practices as they establish their New York presence. They'll need exactly the kind of expertise Elena Taylor offers. "So I could potentially be hired by one of those firms before they're acquired," I said, the possibilities unfolding in my mind, giving me legitimate proximity to James's operation without directly engaging with him. "Precisely. You'd be positioned to observe without being obvious, with a professional reason to understand the details of these business transitions." I sat back, absorbing the elegant complexity of this approach. Not just escaping James, but establishing myself in a position to witness the consequences of his actions without endangering my new identity. "There's one more component to consider," Marlene said, her tone growing more serious. "Your psychological preparation." I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. "Maintaining a new identity isn't just about documentation and appearance," she explained. "It's about inhabiting a different perspective, developing new instincts, responding authentically as Elena rather than reflexively as Catherine." This was something I hadn't fully considered. The physical transformation and paper trail were tangible, steps I could methodically execute. But the internal shift from Catherine Elliott to Elena Taylor required a different kind of preparation. "We have someone who can help with that," Marlene continued. "Dr. Renata Mizrahi, officially a cognitive behavioral therapist, unofficially an expert in helping people transition between identities. She's worked with witnesses in protection, programs, undercover operatives, and women in situations like yours." "Identity coaching," I said, understanding the concept immediately. "Exactly. She'll help you develop Elena's mannerisms, speech patterns, reflexive responses, all the subtle tells that distinguish one person from another beyond physical appearance." I thought about the way I naturally carried myself, the poised, controlled movements cultivated through years as the perfect attorney's wife, always conscious of representing James's interests in public. Elena would move differently, speak differently, react differently to social cues. "When can I start?" I asked. "She's here," Marlene replied. "In room 17. She can work with you for 3 days before you need to move on. 3 days to fundamentally transform how I presented myself to the world." It seemed impossible, until I remembered how thoroughly I had already transformed my appearance, financial situation, and future plans in less than a week. "There's something else you should see," Marlene added, pulling out her tablet. "Your disappearance has triggered unexpected consequences for James." She showed me a breaking news story from a San Diego business publication. Murphy, Keller and Associates announces internal investigation following Elliott departure. The article detailed how James's former law firm had launched a forensic audit of all accounts handled by James after receiving concerning information from a confidential source regarding potential client fund mismanagement. "Marcus," I said softly, recognizing the timing of this development. "He released the documentation." Marlene nodded. "Apparently your husband's former partners are not pleased to discover he's been systematically preparing to compete with them, while still accessing their client information. A second article reported that the California Bar Association had also opened an inquiry into James's professional conduct, specifically regarding potential conflicts of interest in his representation of Bennett Financial Group while developing personal financial entanglements with the Bennett family. "It's starting to unravel for him," I observed, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and detachment. "Faster than I anticipated." "Men like your husband build houses of cards," Marlene said. "Impressive from a distance, but structurally unsound. Usually they maintain the illusion through constant adjustment and manipulation. Once they lose control of the narrative, the whole thing collapses," I finished. My phone, the secure device Marcus had provided, buzzed with an encrypted message. Notification. The sender was identified only as M Network, but I recognized the communication protocol we had established before Marcus went dark. The message was brief. "Package delivered to NYT Investigative Desk. Expect major coverage within 48 hours. Accelerate timeline. Transport arranged for tomorrow, Aero 600. "Marcus has escalated things," I told Marlene, showing her the message. "The New York Times has received documentation about James." Marlene's eyebrows rose. "That changes everything. Once the Times publishes, this becomes a national story, not just about a missing woman, but about legal and financial impropriety at high levels." I nodded, understanding the strategic shift. James will be fighting for his professional survival, not just looking for his missing wife. His priorities will change overnight. Which creates the perfect opportunity for Elena Taylor to establish herself in New York, while attention is focused elsewhere, Marlene concluded. Brilliant timing. I spent the remainder of the day with Dr. Mizrahi, a petite woman with penetrating gray eyes and an analytical approach to identity transformation. She observed my movements, speech patterns, and reflexive gestures with clinical precision, then began the process of helping me develop alternatives consistent with Elena Taylor's background and personality. "Your default posture is too perfect," she noted as I instinctively sat with straight-backed poise during our initial session. Catherine was groomed to present flawless composure in social settings. Elena is confident but more relaxed. She hasn't spent years performing for a husband's colleagues. Hour by hour, she helped me identify and modify dozens of unconscious behaviors that marked me as Catherine Elliott. The way I automatically scanned a room upon entering, assessing the most influential people present. How I modulated my voice when expressing opinions, softening them just enough to seem engaged but not challenging. Even the specific way I held a wine glass, fingers positioned with practiced elegance. Elena holds herself with the easy confidence of someone who relies on her intellect rather than her appearance or connections, Dr. Mizrahi explained. She's professionally accomplished, but not socially performative. She makes eye contact directly, speaks with unfiltered expertise on her subjects of knowledge, and doesn't instinctively defer to male authority figures. By evening, my cheeks ached from consciously relaxing facial muscles that had been perpetually arranged in Catherine's pleasant, attentive expression. My lower back was sore from allowing a slight curve in my posture, rather than maintaining the perfect alignment I'd internalized over years of representing James at social functions. "It's physically exhausting at first," Dr. Mizrahi acknowledged, as we concluded our first day. "You're retraining muscle memory that's been reinforced for over a decade. But within a week, these new patterns will start to feel natural. Within a month, they'll become your default." That night, I practiced Elena's signature in the privacy of my room, a confident, flowing script distinct from Catherine's more controlled penmanship. I recorded myself speaking about organizational development topics, then played back the audio to identify which inflections still needed adjustment. I walked around the small room, consciously adopting Elena's more relaxed gait. The physical and behavioral transformation was demanding, but nothing compared to the psychological shift required. Catherine Elliott had been defined by her relationship to others. Wife of James, designer for wealthy clients, appropriate presence at firm functions. Elena Taylor existed independently, defined by her expertise and choices rather than her associations. Morning brought a flurry of activity as news broke exactly as Marcus had predicted. The New York Times published a detailed exposé titled, "California Attorney's Missing Wife and Missing Millions, Inside James Elliott's Web of Deception." The article methodically outlined James's systematic draining of joint accounts, unauthorized mortgage of their shared home, and plans to launch a competing firm funded partially by assets that legally belonged to his wife, all while portraying himself as a concerned husband desperate to find his missing spouse. Within hours, the story was picked up by national networks. James's carefully crafted image as the worried husband transformed overnight into that of a potential financial predator. The public sympathy he had cultivated evaporated as financial journalists began questioning the timing of his Manhattan real estate purchase and engagement to Victoria Bennett. "Your transport is ready," Marlene announced, entering my room as I finished packing the identity portfolio. "A commercial flight would be too risky right now with your face still in the news, even with your changed appearance. We've arranged private transportation." "Private jet?" I asked, surprised that Marlene's network had such resources. She smiled. "Not exactly. You'll be traveling with a medical transport company that flies patients between specialized treatment facilities. On paper, you're a cognitive therapy patient being transferred to a rehabilitation center in Pennsylvania. From there, you'll have ground transportation to New York." The creativity of these arrangements continued to impress me. "What about accommodation in New York? I'm guessing a hotel is too exposed." Elena Taylor has leased a furnished apartment in Brooklyn Heights through a corporate housing service that specializes in accommodating business consultants on extended assignments, Marlene explained. 3-month minimum, all utilities and services included, secure building with privacy-minded management. Within the hour, I was saying goodbye to the Sundown Motor Lodge, to Marlene, and to the last vestiges of Catherine Elliott. As I settled into the medical transport aircraft disguised as a patient being moved between facilities, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation of the past week. 7 days ago, I had stood in an emerald silk gown watching my husband dance with his mistress, preparing to execute an escape plan months in the making. Today, I was Elena Taylor, blonde-haired and hazel-eyed, with a complete professional identity and the financial resources to establish myself in a new city while my husband's carefully constructed life imploded publicly. As the aircraft took off, carrying me east toward my strategically chosen future, I felt a profound sense of having reclaimed control not just of my circumstances, but of my fundamental identity. The woman James had slowly diminished over 11 years of marriage was gone. Not because she had disappeared, but because she had strategically transformed herself into someone stronger, more autonomous, and completely beyond his reach. Catherine Elliott had vanished without a word, leaving behind only her wedding ring and a husband who would soon discover that underestimating her had been the most consequential mistake of his life. 1 year later, the autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Brooklyn Heights apartment, illuminating the space I had carefully designed over the past year. Clean lines, warm textures, and functional elegance, a physical manifestation of Elena Taylor's approach to life. Nothing like the showpiece home in Rancho Santa Fe that Catherine Elliott had maintained to James's exacting standards. I sipped my coffee, gazing at the Manhattan skyline across the East River while reviewing client emails on my tablet. In 12 months, Elena Taylor Consulting had established a solid reputation for helping organizations navigate complex transitions, exactly the expertise I had strategically developed. My current client roster included 2 law firms, a publishing house, and a boutique financial services company, all undergoing significant leadership changes that required delicate handling. The New York Times alert that appeared on my screen didn't surprise me. I'd been expecting it given yesterday's court proceedings. The headline was succinct. Former California attorney James Elliott sentenced to 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. I opened the article, scanning the details I already knew from following the case through public records. James had pleaded guilty to multiple counts of client fund misappropriation, tax evasion, and fraud related to his failed attempt to launch Elliott and Associates. The plea deal had reduced his potential sentence from 15 years to 5, with the possibility of parole after serving 30 months. What the article didn't mention, what no public record revealed, was that the original evidence triggering the investigation had come from his missing wife's meticulously maintained documentation. Catherine Elliott's disappearance had remained officially unsolved, though interest had waned as James's legal troubles mounted and the more sensational story of his financial crimes took center stage. My secure phone, the one used only for communications, with Marcus and Marlene's network, buzzed with an incoming message. Marcus had maintained his weekly confirmation system for the entire year, a simple donation receipt to the Pacific Wildlife Fund appearing every Friday to signal his continued safety. This was our first direct communication in months. Justice, served, albeit imperfectly. V cut separate deal, testifying against J in exchange for probation. Returning to SD today if you want to watch the arrival. Terminal 4, 3:30 p.m. I set down my coffee, considering the invitation. Victoria Bennett, once poised to become Mrs. James Elliott and co-owner of a Manhattan penthouse, returning to San Diego in disgrace after testifying against her former fiancé. There was a certain symmetry to it. The woman who had danced with my husband as if I were nothing, now herself diminished and exposed. A year ago, I might have felt vindicated, even triumphant at the thought of witnessing Victoria's humiliation. Now, I felt only a distant curiosity, the kind one might have about characters in a story that had once seemed important, but had gradually lost its significance. "No need," I replied to Marcus. That chapter is closed. I returned to my emails, responding to a client's question about managing their upcoming merger announcement. Elena Taylor's life occupied my full attention now. Her clients, her growing professional network, her carefully curated social connections. The woman who had placed a wedding ring on a cocktail table and walked away from 11 years of marriage existed now only in police files and fading news archives. My doorbell rang. Precisely at 10:02 a.m., Diane Chen arriving for our scheduled meeting. I had met Diane 6 months ago at a professional women's networking event, where her expertise in financial restructuring had complemented my organizational development background. We had subsequently collaborated on several projects, developing both a professional partnership and a cautious friendship. "The Hamilton proposal is ready for review," Diane announced as she entered, setting her leather portfolio on my dining table. At 45, she had the confident bearing of someone who had navigated male-dominated industries successfully without surrendering her authentic self, exactly the kind of woman Catherine had rarely encountered in James's carefully controlled social circle. "Perfect timing," I replied, bringing a second cup of coffee to the table. "I just finished the cultural assessment section last night. We worked efficiently through the morning, refining our proposal for a law firm undergoing a significant restructuring following a merger. The irony wasn't lost on me. Elena Taylor now built her reputation helping organizations through exactly the kind of transition James had planned before his downfall. "Did you see the news?" Diane asked during a brief break, her expression carefully neutral. She knew nothing of my past, but like most professionals in our field, followed major business-related legal cases. "About James Elliott? Yes, just this morning." 5 years seems light for what he did, Diane observed. "Though I suppose his reputation is destroyed regardless." I nodded noncommittally. The legal system rarely delivers perfect justice. That poor wife of his. What was her name? Catherine? Diane shook her head sympathetically. "They never found her, did they?" No, I replied, maintaining Elena's slightly detached interest in a news story that had no personal connection to her. Though the investigation seemed to shift focus once his financial crimes came to light. I remember the case fascinated me. When it first broke, Diane continued, a woman vanishes without a trace, leaving only her wedding ring behind. Then evidence emerges suggesting her husband was planning to leave her anyway. Like something from a movie. Life is often stranger than fiction, I offered, steering the conversation back to our proposal. After Diane left, I found myself drawn to the secure laptop I kept in my home office, the one used exclusively for monitoring matters related to my former life. I hadn't checked in weeks, maintaining my resolution to focus forward rather than backward, but today's news warranted an exception. Catherine Elliott's disappearance had gradually faded from public interest as James's legal troubles escalated. The police investigation remained technically open but inactive. The most recent media mention had been a brief "Where Are They Now" segment on a true crime podcast 3 months earlier, rehashing familiar theories. Catherine had met with foul play unrelated to James. She had taken her own life due to undisclosed mental health issues. She had planned her disappearance to escape a failing marriage. All speculation, no conclusions. I closed the laptop, satisfied that Catherine Elliott existed now primarily as a footnote in the story of James's downfall rather than as an active investigation. The careful planning that had enabled my disappearance had proven effective beyond my most optimistic projections. My afternoon included a video consultation with a potential new client, a publishing house seeking guidance on integrating a recently acquired literary agency. As I discussed change management strategies and cultural alignment, I found myself fully present as Elena Taylor, with no echoes of Catherine Elliott's more deferential communication style. Dr. Mizrahi had been right. The new patterns had become natural within weeks, automatic within months. The physical transformation had been similarly complete. My honey blonde hair now grew naturally from the roots, maintained with subtle highlighting. The colored contacts had given way to laser eye surgery that permanently lightened my dark brown eyes to a more amber hue, a medical procedure justified by practical benefits, but serving the dual purpose of permanent identity transformation. Evening found me at a small gallery opening in Chelsea, supporting a photographer whose work I had admired since discovering it shortly after arriving in New York. The space hummed with quiet conversation as attendees moved between striking black and white images, documenting urban transformation, once abandoned. Buildings now reimagined as community spaces. Elena, I wasn't sure you'd make it. Sophia, the photographer, greeted me warmly. In her early 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and an artist's observant eyes, she had become one of my few close connections in the city. I wouldn't miss it, I replied truthfully. Your work deserves celebration. As I circulated through the gallery, engaging in the kind of authentic conversations Elena naturally cultivated, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window overlooking the street. The woman looking back bore no resemblance to the carefully groomed attorney's wife who had once moved through San Diego charity galas with practiced poise. This woman, with her relaxed confidence, genuine smile, and natural elegance, was entirely self-possessed. The gallery door opened, admitting a late arrival who caught my attention immediately, not because I recognized him, but because of his striking resemblance to James. The same tall build and distinguished salt-and-pepper hair, similar confident bearing. For a disorienting moment, my carefully constructed new reality seemed to waver. Then he turned fully toward the room, and the resemblance dissolved. His features were entirely different, his expression open and engaged rather than calculating. Just a random man attending an art opening, notable only for a superficial similarity to someone from my past. You okay? Sophia asked, noticing my momentary stillness. Perfect, I assured her, the brief disorientation already fading. Just admiring how the light plays across your harbor series. Later that night, as I walked home along the Brooklyn promenade, I paused to look out at the illuminated Manhattan skyline. Somewhere in California, James Elliott was beginning his first night of incarceration. Somewhere in San Diego, Victoria Bennett was likely facing the wreckage of plans that had once seemed certain. And here I stood, a continent away, building a life that belonged entirely to me. My secure phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. Jay's Rancho Santa Fe house sold at auction today. Final link severed. You are officially and completely free. The message highlighted a truth I had already internalized. My liberation had never depended on James's conviction or the sale of our former home. Those were merely external confirmations of a freedom I had claimed the moment I walked out of the Oceanside Resort with my wedding ring left behind. I continued my walk home, planning the next day's client meetings and considering which of Sophia's photographs might complement my apartment's aesthetic. Elena Taylor's thoughts, Elena Taylor's plans, Elena Taylor's life, authentic and self-directed, in ways Catherine Elliott's had never been. The following morning brought an unexpected email to my professional account. A consulting inquiry from Barrett & Hughes, the prestigious law firm where James had once hoped to establish his New York practice before his plans collapsed. They were seeking organizational development support following a significant leadership transition. The symmetry was so perfect it nearly made me laugh aloud. The very firm that had featured in James's escape fantasy now wanted to hire the expertise of the woman who had escaped him. I drafted a polished, professional response accepting their invitation to discuss their needs further, signing it with Elena Taylor's confident signature. As I prepared for my day, applying subtle makeup and selecting a tailored outfit that balanced professionalism with Elena's more relaxed aesthetic, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From the desperate wife placing her wedding ring on a cocktail table to an established consultant with growing recognition in my field, I had traversed more than just physical distance. My secure phone buzzed with a final message from Marcus. 1-year anniversary today. Congratulations on your rebirth. I hadn't been tracking the date, but he was right. Exactly 1 year had passed since the Oceanside Resort Charity Gala, since watching James dance with Victoria as if I were nothing, since executing the escape plan that had transformed not just my circumstances, but my fundamental sense of self. I texted back a simple response. Not a rebirth, an unveiling. Because that was the truth at the core of my journey. Elena Taylor wasn't a fabricated identity I had created to escape James Elliott. She was the woman who had always existed beneath Catherine's carefully maintained facade. The authentic self I had gradually surrendered during 11 years of marriage to a man who valued appearance over substance, control over partnership. In disappearing, I had paradoxically become more visible to myself than I had been in years. In vanishing without a word, I had found my true voice. In walking away from a man who danced with another woman as if I were nothing, I had discovered I was everything I needed to be. As I stepped out into the crisp autumn morning, Elena Taylor moved forward with purposeful steps, leaving Catherine, Elliott's ghost, exactly where she belonged, in the past, along with the wedding ring on that cocktail table and the husband who had never truly seen the woman he had married. Sometimes, I reflected as I joined the stream of New Yorkers heading to their daily purposes, the most powerful statement isn't what you say when you leave, it's that you leave at all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.